Hello, everybody, and welcome to Charts with Dan. And much like John Oliver has been doing, I'm coming to you this week from a void. As I mentioned last week, we are doing some studio improvements and updates, and so our usual studio setup is not here anymore. So pardon the blankness behind me, pardon the slight echo that I'm sure you're probably hearing. It's all part of the process. We have some big improvements and some really cool stuff that I cannot wait to show you. It's going to take a couple more weeks for us to finish, but I think you're really going to enjoy it. I know that we're very excited about it. So please excuse the spare setup that we have today, but we have, just as spare as the backdrop is today, we have more news to report because this has been a massive week when it comes to what's going on with exhibition, not just here in the United States, but also in the UK. So many events that are having seismic repercussions just in the last couple of days. I was actually going to shoot this yesterday on Sunday, like I had planned to try to get it done a little bit earlier. Like I mentioned, we have so much going on right now, but I held off because I was waiting for some developments that actually happened. So there's a lot to get to, but let's start, as we always do, with what was number one at the box office this past weekend, and as it has been the last several weeks, Tenet is still the number one movie with $2.6 million. So another 20% drop or so for Tenet. And this performance is a large part of why we're seeing some of what's happening right now. It's still doing fine. It's dropping about 20% week over week. But remember, Warner Brothers wanted it to be a marathon performance. They wanted the movie to be able to maybe drop a little bit less than that for week to week. It's just that people have not been going out to movies in the numbers that they'd hoped, and more movie theaters aren't open as they thought that there might be at this point in the run. That's going to be a big component of what we're talking about later. A bit of a surprise number two, there was talk that Hocus Pocus might be in the top 5, but it actually was in second place for the weekend. This is a Halloween classic. People watching it every year. It's on TV probably right now, but enough people went to see it at the movie theaters this weekend for it to be number 2. The New Mutants is at number 3 with $1 million. Then you have Unhinged at number 4, and then Infidel slides back into the top 5. It was replaced last week by the reissue of The Empire Strikes Back. That dropped back a little bit this weekend. Infidel comes back up to the top 5. So it is a top 5, but not exactly a vibrant top 5. Let's look at what that does for 2020 as far as the domestic grosses so far this year. Nothing moves on the chart really, and we talked about this in the last couple weeks. After Tenet moved up to that number 8 spot underneath Onward, it's got a lot of work to do to start climbing the chart again. So it is still there at number 8, but there were some big changes in the worldwide box office, and the reason why is that the Chinese box office is really getting back into full swing. Their capacity limits were raised to 75% recently, and there was a big National Day holiday over the weekend, and that led to 2 films that opened over $150 million, and because the marketplace has been so down this year, that leaps them right into the top 10 for 2020 worldwide. So Zhangxia, Legend of Deification, which is a follow-up to Neja from last year, is at number 8, and then My People, My Homeland, which, as you can probably tell from the title, is a very patriotic skewing film, is there at number 7. So the Chinese box office now supporting $250 million openers. I'm sure that's a bit of a sting for people everywhere else, particularly the big cinema chains like AMC and Cineworld, which we'll talk about, who are struggling to just stay open. When you look at the Chinese box office, the fact that it is now thriving and on its way back to full steam. So they jump in at 7 and 8. Tenet jumps Sonic the Hedgehog for number 3 for 2020. Then you have The Invisible Man and Onward that drop down 2 spots. So we now have 3 of the top 10 films, including the number 1 movie worldwide this year, is from the Chinese market. And given the news that's come out the last few days, it's very likely that not only will the highest grossing film of the year be from China, but that China may be the world's leading film market, which is something that had been predicted as to potentially happen in the next few years, but certainly not under these circumstances. And, it sucks. It sucks. It sucks that the market here and elsewhere around the world is not rebounding the way that everyone had hoped it would, but it is not. And that's actually the topic for most of what we're going to talk about here on the show today, because this last week has been a huge week and something that we've honestly been talking about on the show for the last couple of weeks, the idea of whether cinemas can afford to stay open given how many people are attending, particularly here in the United States, also in the UK, where the epicenter of this story is, because we broke down the numbers a couple of weeks ago that given how much movies are making and given what the box office looks like and the cuts that the studios are getting, we looked at the numbers, the fact that cinemas are probably losing money by staying open. And we found out, at least for one big chain, that that is absolutely the case with some huge consequences. But let's go back to early last week. There was an open letter that was written from the head of the Directors Guild of America, from the head of NATO, the National Association of Theater Owners, and from the Motion Picture Association, open letter to Congress asking for undistributed funds from the coronavirus relief package to be given to theaters. Part of what they said was, and I quote, "The pandemic has been a devastating financial blow to cinemas. 93% of movie theater companies had over 75% in losses in the second quarter of 2020. If the status quo continues," and this is an insane number, 69% of small and mid-sized movie theater companies will be forced to file for bankruptcy or to close permanently. And 66% of theater jobs will be lost. Our country cannot afford to lose the social, economic, and cultural value that theaters provide. And if you look at who co-signed this letter, and it was a list of names, and it looks like certainly not a complete list, but Christopher Nolan, Wes Anderson, James Cameron, Greta Gerwig, Patty Jenkins, Barry Jenkins, Ang Lee, Martin Scorsese, James Wan, Zack Snyder, Edgar Wright, actors, filmmakers, you name it, that signed on to this letter, basically asking Congress to step in and provide relief to movie theaters who are desperately in need of it. Now, the second round of relief has been locked up in legislative gridlock for weeks now. It has still not been passed. There are many other industries, including the airline industry, who are hurting very badly because there is not additional relief that is being handed out. So cinemas are not the only business that are hurting, but there is no assistance right now headed their way. And that is causing some grave, grave consequences to the market. So last Friday was actually a big day of motion. It started with the Standard & Poor's, who analyzes the market, etc., downgraded the credit rating for AMC, which was already not in a great spot. And here's what Standard & Poor's said as they were analyzing the marketplace. Quote, "Given our expectations for a high rate of cash burn, we believe the company will run out of liquidity, money, within the next 6 months unless it is able to raise additional capital, which we view as unlikely, or attendance levels materially improve. We believe a liquidity crisis is all but inevitable, even if the company were to fully reopen all of its theaters. We think cinema attendance will remain constrained by consumers' health and safety concerns and social distancing measures until an effective treatment or vaccine becomes widely available, which could be mid-2021, and will not recover to 2019 levels until 2022. That's a terrible prognosis. I mean, basically 6 months and they're out of money unless it materially improves the attendance, which the theater chains were banking on a big holiday season with a lot of the big releases that were coming up. This is something that has been, this idea of a big fourth quarter has been something that theaters are praying for, because it's, for some of them, their only salvation, because here we have a credit rating firm saying that AMC is going to be out of money in months. That was already bad news, but then the really bad news hit later that day when No Time to Die announced officially that they are not going to be opening on their November date, that they're delaying the film until April 2nd, 2021. This was a dagger in the heart to theaters, because Wonder Woman had already moved. October was pretty much empty of major releases. Now you have the biggest major release in November gone. No James Bond. Now we have Soul. Soul is left on November 20th. However, there have been rumblings that Soul may not be coming out either, that it's either going to be pushed or moved to Disney+. So all of October has been cleared out. Now theaters are looking at the prospect and perhaps the probability that all of November is going to be cleared out. And this is after they opened theaters at a loss more than likely, and actually Cineworld has confirmed in what we're about to talk about, that it is at a loss for them to remain open for one movie, which is Tenet, which didn't draw the amount of crowds that they wanted, and then everything behind it moved. So this has been literally, when we started this crisis and the theaters were closed, I thought that was the worst thing that could happen to theaters. As it turns out, it's been worse for them to stay open, given the attendance numbers and given the fact that everything moved, because it's gone from bad to worse. It's gone from making no money to losing money being open. That is not good, and that is what motivated what came next, which is that on Saturday, Variety reported that Cineworld, which is the largest company in the UK, they run Regal, which is the second largest chain here in the United States, was going to close all of its locations in the UK and Ireland, and that it would also close all of the Regal locations in the United States. Late last night, the word came out, and then through social media, Cineworld confirmed it this morning that they are indeed closing all Cineworld cinemas in the UK starting on Friday. Then the Regal chain tweeted that they will also be closing all theaters in the United States at the close of business on Thursday, October 8th, 2020, until further notice. So that's Thursday. If you live in a community where the Regal is the only theater near you, after Thursday, that theater will be closed. And we don't know when they're going to reopen. There was an interview that was done by the head of Cineworld, who was speaking to Deadline, and he said that the closure, this decision to close, that Bond moving was just the last straw, but that this really goes to, and where Cineworld is placing the blame, is New York. They believe that New York was the motivating factor behind movie studios pushing their releases, and that the fact that New York has opened up many other types of businesses, including casinos, but not movie theaters, that's where they place the blame. They place the blame on the state of New York because they believe that that market is the one that motivated all studios to push their movies, which then motivated them to close their theaters. There is a lot of anger there, and you can tell because, and I understand, when you're running a theater chain and you get these promises, you get these release dates, you're basically told that if you open up, these movies are going to be there waiting for you, and then one by one they move, and then you look around and you see what businesses are open, and you see that movie theaters still are not. I understand the anger there. However, playing devil's advocate here, if you look at the news coming out of New York, there is a resurgence of this virus in certain parts of New York, particularly in New York City, so that they are trying to control. So I can also understand, particularly now, why they're not making any motion toward reopening theaters. We can question all we want about why these theaters are open and why they're closed and why some are not, haven't been moved to open. I know that is certainly a big question here in California. Why are indoor theaters not cleared to open in all counties? They're open in some counties, but not all counties. This is disastrous for exhibition because it's not like we're at the beginning of this crisis. Most of these theaters were closed for months starting in March. They opened in August only to lose more money than when they were closed, and now they're facing the prospect of closing again. And really, the biggest thing that this is an impact, and I don't want this to get lost in the story, is that tens of thousands of employees are now being furloughed, essentially laid off, with no idea of when they are going to get back to work with the closing of Regal. Now, the next question is AMC going to close? We saw that the bad news had come in about AMC. There was also news from the UK that Odeon, which is a big chain over there, they're going to weekends only hours in about 25% of their venues there in the UK. But now eyes shift to AMC, and it's possible by the time this video is out that AMC may have announced either a reduction in hours, which is something that's been rumored for a while, or perhaps the full-scale closure of their movies. But this is kind of a chicken and the egg situation because in that interview with the head of Cineworld, they said that they will open when they are assured that a slate of studio films will be reaching theaters. So it was asked, will you open for Wonder Woman 1984? They said, we will, but not just for one movie. If Wonder Woman comes out and we're assured by studios that they will continue releasing movies, then yes, we'll open for Wonder Woman. But if all the other movies push, then it's almost like a staring contest because the theaters won't open without movies playing, but movies won't come out unless there are theaters open to show them. So this give and take is very confusing to try to figure out. It's almost like they're facing off with each other to see who wants to lose money less, because obviously the studios don't want to lose money by putting out movies that people aren't going to go see, but the theaters don't want to lose money by opening for movies that are then going to get pushed. And so this is the thing that we're going to have to navigate, and I honestly don't know how they're going to do it, because if I'm Warner Brothers and the second largest theater chain in the United States and the largest theater chain in the world is closed, then why would I want to put out Wonder Woman 1984 knowing that they've said that they're not going to open just for my movie? But at the same time, the theaters are never going to open if a bunch of movies don't say that they're coming out. We are now stuck in a quagmire of companies trying to figure out how to survive and how to stay afloat. And I don't know what the way out is going to be. I really don't know, because let's look at what the 2020 schedule is going to be. I just made this nice and clean last week, and we already have red marks. So No Time to Die is gone. It has moved to April 2nd, 2021. So we now have basically two major releases on the schedule for November, Soul and The Croods: A New Age. However, again, Regal at the very least has said that they're not going to open for one movie. So even if Soul stays there, will Regal open for that movie? And here's an audio pickup, because this stuff moves so quickly that another story broke while I was editing the episode. It's just been announced that Dune is reportedly moving off of the December 18th date that it had been given just recently by Warner Brothers. It's moving to next October 2021, which is currently where The Batman is slated to open. Obviously, there's going to be a release date change announced for that movie as well. I know, right? Now back to me from 30 minutes ago. It seems like perhaps the best shot we have at these theaters reopening, there was just a new trailer for Free Guy that came out today that still has that December 11th opening date and says it's coming out in theaters. So it's possible that if the studios, if look at the situation, perhaps if New York is somehow open, if California is somehow open, and studios look at the situation and say like, okay, December 11th on, we're committed to putting out those films, then Regal at least has said here in the US and Cineworld worldwide that they will open if there's a slate of studio films. But we just don't know. And that's the frustrating thing for me. The most frustrating thing is we are now 7 months into this, and we still don't know what the hell is going on. That is so frustrating. And I know that this show is usually about charts and numbers, but when you don't have any charts and numbers, you really can only have the business left to talk about. And it is so frustrating that we don't know what the hell is going on 7 months later. That is insane. And the story of how and why and when we got to this point will be written for decades from now, as we look back on this pandemic worldwide and how it was handled here in the United States. But the fact of the matter is that we are now 7 months into it, and we know less right now than we did when it started. I agree, first of all, with the letter that was sent to Congress, with the letter that was sent to the legislators, asking for relief for movie theaters. I understand that there are a lot of people in need, that there are a lot of businesses in need. Trillions of dollars have been allocated to help businesses in need. The movie theater industry, if you look at the numbers in the last 5 years, has brought in about $11 billion in box office grosses. That's not an inconsiderable amount of money in my mind. I think when you look at the dollars, and not just the dollars, but the psychological impact of it, the fact that movies are an escape for so many people, the fact that this being able to get back to this, or at least being able to know that these theaters are going to be there for us when this is all over, the psychological effects of that, I think, are worth an investment if the government can get its shit together and actually do something to help the people that need it. And right now, they can't do that. They can't do that. And I'm not pointing my fingers at one side or the other side. I think that that's for other people to do. I certainly have my own strong opinions on that issue. However, when you get down to it, the fact of the matter is that something needs to be done, and that people are hurting here in the United States due to their inaction. I think that there should be money allocated to help these chains survive. I think that there should be money allocated to help independent and smaller theaters survive. Because if we get to the other end of this and theaters are gone or theaters are at a substantially reduced number, I think that is going to have a detrimental psychological effect on people in that there is no regular life to go back to. There's a lasting effect there. And that's already true in so many other areas, including literal life and death. It would be nice if this escape was there for people to go back to in a few months or 8 months or a year or however long it takes to get through this. So I think that movie theaters are worth saving. I understand that there's a lot out there that also needs to be saved, but when you look at the amount of money that would probably be needed just to keep them afloat versus the amount of money that has been allocated, if we could just get someone to do something, I think we could save this industry, and I think we could ensure that people have these places to go back to. The question is there the will to do it from the people that have the responsibility to do it? I think I know the answer, but we will see. So a developing story here. I wish there was better news. There's not right now, but we will continue tracking it here on the show, obviously, and then we will see what the future brings. But a bad week for theatrical exhibition, maybe the worst week they've ever had as far as news goes. I mean, there have certainly been crises in the past, but we are now facing an unprecedented level of threat to movie going, not just here in the United States, but around the world. Let's awkwardly transition from that into flashing back to a time when you could go to the movies, and a lot of people were there. Let's go back to 20 years ago. This is October 6th through the 8th in the year 2000, and it was the opening week of Meet the Parents, opened with $28.6 million. Robert De Niro at the early part of his comedy phase, when most of his comedies were still good. Then we have Remember the Titans. This is a banner week for Schmoedown fans and Schmoedown competitors, sure, most assuredly. Remember the Titans came out almost 20 years ago. This was week 2 at $19.2 million. It actually had a very good hold from its first week. That was a big movie. People love that movie. Then Sylvester Stallone in a remake of a Michael Caine movie, Get Carter, opened with $6.6 million in its first week. The 2000 director's cut of The Exorcist in its third week was still in the top 5 at $4.4 million. And then I'm sure that there is a certain group of kids to whom this means a lot. Digimon the movie opened this week 20 years ago in the 5th spot. Didn't quite have the success that Pokemon had in its box office run, but it opened in the top 5 20 years ago. Looking at some other notable moments from this week in box office history, and if you were an Oscar contender, the first weekend in October was one that I think you definitely wanted to target, because particularly in the last 15 years or so, there have been some very notable Academy Award winners that were all released on this same weekend each year. Let's look at that. Back in 2006, The Departed opened at number 1. It went on to win Best Picture and Best Director. In 2010, The Social Network, it's hard to believe that was a decade ago that movie came out. It opened at number 1 and went on to win Best Original Screenplay. Then you have, I think it's Best Adapted Screenplay. Then you have 2013, Gravity opened at number 1. It went on to win Best Director. And then, this feels like 4 years ago. Last year, this weekend, Joker opened with $96 million. It went on to win Best Actor for Joaquin Phoenix. But that is mind-boggling to think about, the fact that Joker was a year ago. Just 1 year ago, and to think about how different everyone's life was at that time. What a difference a year makes. Okay, let's finish out with a look at the top streaming charts, starting with Amazon. Number 1, still number 1 from last week, is Antebellum. At number 2 is Halloween Town, which had entered at, I think, number 6 last week. This is apparently a generational thing. A lot of people saying that they grew up with this movie. It's a Disney movie, Disney Channel movie. I did not, but a lot of people saying that this is a staple in their households. So that's there at number 2. Bill and Ted Face the Music at number 3. The Karate Kid and Guest House and Rogue, all holdovers from last week's chart. And then at number 7, Hocus Pocus. Like I'm saying, people are watching it at home. They're watching it in theaters. They're watching it on cable. They just love Hocus Pocus. It's that time of year. We're in the first week of October. Equalizer 2, John Wick, and The King of Staten Island finished up the top 10 for Amazon. Let's look at what people are watching over on iTunes. At number 1, we have Ava, which was the number 1 film, a new 2020 movie. That's a holdover from last week. Then at number 2 is Archive, which was a 99-cent rental this week on iTunes. The Secret Dare to Dream, which was on the chart last week. Then we have A Call to Spy, Then Came You, and 2067. Those are all 2020 releases that also were available to rent for $7. So new plus cheap equals top 10. Then we have Alone, Red Shoes and the Seven Dwarfs, which are holdovers from last week. American Made with Tom Cruise jumps in there at the top 10, there at number 9. And then The King of Staten Island is at number 10. That's had a bit of a staying power. That's been on the chart for a good part of the summer, off and on. And then let's look at what people are watching over on Netflix. At number 1 is American Murder, The Family Next Door. It's a true crime documentary, and I love those. I haven't seen this one. I've heard good things about it. People eat those things up like catnip. That's number 1. At number 2 is The Outpost, which had a great VOD launch earlier this year, now streaming on Netflix. Then we have Enola Holmes, which stays in the top 5. Welcome to Sudden Death, which is a Netflix original with Michael Jai White, so why not, right? Yogi Bear there at number 5. Vampires versus the Bronx, which is a new film, at number 6. The Boys in the Band, which is an adaptation of the famous stage play, there at number 7. Then Real Steel and The Social Dilemma, holding over from last week. And at number 10, another Netflix original called You've Got This, rounds out the top 10. So that's the show for this week. Not the happiest of shows. I am so looking forward to when I can sit back here and talk about breaking records and multipliers and how long the legs are on a movie and adjusting for inflation and all the stuff that this show was built on. I miss that. I've almost forgotten how to do the show with that stuff. I can't wait till it comes back. We just have to get there. I thought we'd be there by now. We're not. We just have to keep hoping that we're going to be able to get there soon and wait and see. So we will stay tuned. We'll see what happens with AMC this week. If there's any announcement about their hours, are they going to reduce hours? Are they going to shut down? We don't know that information as we're taping the show. Once again, thank you for sticking around. This is a new camera. This is not a set. This is just a room. So for any of the glitches, the fact that it looks a little rougher than usual, thank you so much for hanging in. Like I said, just a couple more weeks, and then we're going to be unveiling something very awesome and very cool that I think you guys are going to really, really enjoy. So thank you so much for watching. If you like what I'm doing, you can check me out over on Patreon at patreon.com/Dan Murrell. We are doing 31 days of Halloween, which means that we're watching a scary movie every single day. Mara and I are doing recaps at the end of every week. We're writing daily posts, breaking down our thoughts on each movie, in addition to our watch-along that we are now doing with all of the patrons. I've got the movie club. This month we're doing horror comedies. That's going to be a lot of fun. Schmodown study sessions and commentaries. There's so much great stuff going on Patreon. I'd love for you to come check it out. Thank you so much for watching me here, and thank you to these patrons who really help keep things going. These are some of my producer level patrons. I really appreciate their faith and their trust and their passion and their enthusiasm. So thank you to these folks, and thank you to you. We will be back here next week with hopefully some better news. I don't know how I'll be back. Maybe I'll be in the void. We may have to go voice only. It just depends on what stage we are with what we're doing. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.